wherever you are, be fully present to that moment. And create margins in your life is another one that we talk about. You have to have margins, like margins in a book where you have space, just space to write your thoughts or think your thoughts. Or for me, it's always been a mental health day once a week. I call it my mental health day, where I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do much other than hang out in the pool or binge watch something on television, which yes, I do. And it's just going to recharge my batteries. And so I believe in harmony. I think it's possible to have harmony. I think it's almost impossible to have balance.
Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. I'm your host, Maria de Lorenzo Reyes. Today in the studio, I have with me a very exciting guest, Dr. Ivan Misner, who is the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI. If you're not familiar, BNI is the world's largest business networking organization, and it was founded in 1985. I'm going to give you a little brief introduction, and then I'm going to welcome Dr. Misner. So the organization now has over 11,400 chapters in 76 countries throughout every populated continent of the world. Last year alone, BNI generated 16.6 million referrals, resulting in more than $24.4 billion worth of business for its members. Dr. Misner is a best-selling New York Times bestselling author who has written 32 books, including the newest, Networking is a Marathon, Not a Sprint. And he also writes for entrepreneur.com and is a university professor at several universities. He is called the father of modern networking by both Forbes and CNN. And Dr. Misner is considered to be one of the world's leading experts on business networking. I'd like to welcome you. Ivan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Maria, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So after that intro, what I'd love to ask is just the idea for BNI, for our folks who are listening or watching. Where did this come from and how did it evolve? Sometimes, an idea is small and then it kind of just snowballs and grows. Can you give us a little brief history of how that all happened and where it got to where it is today?
Well, I think the scenario you just described was perfect for what BNI was in the early days. I mean, I'd like to tell you I had this vision of an international organization, but I just needed an organization that I could get referrals from, and then I could help my friends get referrals. And it snowballed. It became something much bigger than I anticipated. I think it's a great example of necessity being the mother of invention. Yeah. Networking in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. So many people want to get business through referrals, but they don't know how to do it. And oftentimes they do it wrong. I spoke at an event years ago, and there were like 900 people in the audience. And I said, how many of you are here today hoping to, just possibly sell something? And Maria, 900 people raised their hands. I said, great. How many of you are here today hoping to, maybe buy something? No one raised their hands. Not one single person. So this is what I call the networking disconnect. People show up wanting to sell, but they're not there to buy. And so the reason for that is we don't teach people how to network effectively. And so what they do is they go out and they use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. And I saw that early on in my networking. And I wanted to create an organization that was focused on business, but wasn't mercenary. And that was relational, but not totally social. And the glue that would hold it together is this philosophy of giver's gain. And that just took off. And as you said, we now have over 11,000. I got a report this morning. It's now over 11,500 chapters worldwide.
Wow. That is amazing. Well, I love the fact that a lot of this was fueled from the necessity, right? Mother necessity is the mother of invention, as you said, and I totally agree. But I would also, in my experience running a business, I have a business myself for the last 18 years, but even I came from the corporate world. I think even in the corporate world, you said nobody's taught networking, and people sometimes misinterpret what the purpose is and even how to do it effectively, of course. But could you elaborate a little bit more on this notion of giver's gain, and what you mean by that? Because that's really intriguing.
Yeah, so giver's gain is an important concept. It's one of our core values in the organization, and it's certainly the philosophy of the organization. And it's more than a phrase to me. It's a way of living one's life. It's a perspective to view and interact with the world. It's an attitude, not an expectation. And when it's applied properly, it'll change someone's life. And when it changes enough lives, it'll change the world. And it's really all about focusing on helping other people succeed in their business. And by doing that, they will be willing to do the same for you. And there are guidelines and restrictions to that concept, but as a general rule, it works pretty darn well. You mentioned in the intro 24 billion. I just got some numbers for what 2025 will look like. And it looks like we're going to end the year passing 17 million referrals, generating 27 billion with a B, 27 billion US dollars worth of business for our members. That's how much money they made. Now, to really put that in perspective, and I love this statistic. If you take a look at the United Nations estimates of GDP, gross domestic product, by the United Nations, there are actually 100 countries, Maria, 100 countries in the world with a lower GDP than what BNI generated for its members in the last 12 months. That blows my mind.
Wow. That is quite astonishing, and certainly like to be proud of. That is the impact that you have had for not only the members but really the business communities,
Yeah,
that
and
make this.
that's really, I think, the result of the philosophy of Giver's Gain. We're going to go there. We're going to help each other
Mhm.
build each other's business, and when you do that, magic happens.
Yeah. Well, I love, thank you for explaining that. And I love the concept. Obviously, it's one that a lot of people live their life by. And I love that it's your values, and that's threaded throughout what the members do and what you as an organization, have the impact, or really are living up to that impact of that aspiration. And I think in general, it's what's interesting to me is I talk a lot about leadership, right? And the philosophy is almost the same in terms of that. It's that how can I serve? Showing up to serve first, right? And you said magic happens, in the giver's game. It's really the same. It's that if you are showing up to serve
Yeah.
and you do that and help others, even your team with that mindset, then they are more open to and willing to and motivated to give back in the way that we had hoped. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the subject of leadership because I have some strong feelings on that. I think that leadership is not about managing and complying.
Hmm.
Leadership is about mobilizing and inspiring.
Hmm.
It's about mobilizing a team, getting them together, and inspiring them to go in a certain direction. Now, that doesn't mean that management and compliance aren't important. Believe me, they are.
Hmm.
But that's management. That's not leadership. Leadership is about mobilizing and inspiring. And I think you need to have both. You need to have that management, but you most definitely, if you want to scale a business and take it, uh, citywide, region-wide, nationwide, global, you have to learn how to scale a business, and that means you need to learn how to lead and mobilize and inspire your team to do the things necessary to be successful in business.
Yeah. 100%. And a lot of I often am training in companies and training leaders, CEOs, and upper management teams. And and my own journey as a leader, coming from corporate and then becoming a business owner myself, and really crafting the art of leadership. I learned that in my corporate role, but quite frankly, I decided to not follow what was modeled because it was more of the command and control, the old style of leadership that really frankly doesn't work in today's day and age. And it
Right.
probably never really did. People just felt like they didn't have a choice.
I think it did
But
work. Well, yeah, I think you're right. They thought they didn't have a choice. I mean, if you go back into it now, now I'm going to put my professor hat on
I love it.
because I taught management theory for many years, and the first books on management weren't written until the late 1800s.
Hmm.
Max Weber, Frederick Taylor, the Gants. These are the people that really started talking about management. And back then, it was called scientific management.
Yeah.
And so there was a science to management, and they had it, and it was all about productivity, 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 productivity. That was the first paradigm, I think, of management. The second paradigm was cooperation. And I've written a book on this. It's called The Third Paradigm. And the second paradigm was cooperation. And that's where people started to realize, people are really kind of important to this process. And taking care of people are kind of important in this process. And that really started to happen in the 50s, 60s, with Theory X, Theory Y. The
Hmm.
idea that you have both productivity and people both were important, which was, we listen to it today and it's like, well, yeah, that's obvious. But in the 60s, that was unheard of. Absolutely. I studied under Warren Bennis at the University of Southern California. He was a professor there. And he said, he worked for the school where they released this study, and they got bomb threats because they thought it was, socialist. And
Hmm.
so, now it's common understanding that you have to have a cooperative relationship with people. The third paradigm is co-creation, where you're not just cooperating, you literally create something together with your team, embracing your team's input and giving them the authority to make decisions, and that works across company to company as well. So yeah, scientific management is all about productivity. We started getting into cooperativeness, but co-creation, a good example of co-creation, by the way, for people who are going, I don't get it, what is that? Is crowdsourcing.
Mm.
Crowdsourcing is a great example of co-creation where you go to the wisdom of the crowd and get feedback from the crowd to create something.
Yeah,
The
that's
third
great.
paradigm is the book that I wrote on this topic, the third
I
paradigm.
love that. Yeah, I love that. Third paradigm. Well, first of all, let me say that anything that we reference and we'll link in the show notes. So I'd love to give people an opportunity to check out that book as well as your other books as well. Let me ask you a question as a follow up to that. As I said, I love the what you said in terms of the progression of how things change, and of course that's my experience as well. I think I was always a rebel and I decided, hey, this isn't working the way they're showing me to do it. So I'm going to do it differently, and kind of discovered that on my own naturally, that having that co creation and motivating people and being inspirational worked better. So, of course, I did it. But let me ask you this. You talked about the evolution and coming to understand that people are important. What would you say right now with all the talk about AI? And, I have my own opinions and perspective on this. But there are some people who are saying that, oh, well, that's not important anymore because AI is going to be our partner and who we rely on. What would you say to that? And what are your thoughts about how that will play out? And kind of your feelings on, is that still going to be an important thing in terms of leading and scaling a business to be able to make sure that we're inspiring people?
Yes, I think it will. And there's a multifaceted question that you just asked, starting with the phrase that words matter. And I agree, words absolutely do matter. But the older I get, the more I believe less and less in words and more in behaviors. And words matter. So what people say it's important. The only thing more important is how they behave. And so behavior is incredibly important. And I wrote another book that talks about this called Who's in Your Room, which is about the people that you surround yourself with. Who's in your head, who are you allowing into your room? And so behaviors are real important. Now, regarding AI, look, that horse is out of the barn. And so the people who are like, I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to incorporate it, I can't, we shouldn't be doing it. I'm sorry, it's too late. I believe that you either lead disruption or you will be disrupted. And to me, I could give you multiple examples, but my favorite is Kodak. Kodak invented the digital camera. They owned the patent on the digital camera, but they didn't want to interfere with their film processing business. So they licensed out the patent to the digital camera. And there was even one senior executive who wrote a memo that said, we don't want to go down that route. Hurt our film processing business. Besides, who's ever going to look at photographs on a computer? So I want your viewers, your listeners to really hear this. You're going to lead the disruption or you're going to be disrupted. Kodak was disrupted by the very thing they created and chose not to pursue. And they were disrupted by that. Kodak could be Apple. They could be Apple. Yeah. I mean, Apple did computers. Who would have thought they'd do phones? Phones aren't in their wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. But cameras, they were in Kodak's wheelhouse. And had someone said, hey, look, there might be other ways to use this digital camera. Let's start doing it. And then, down the road, they could have incorporated it into telephones. Kodak could have been Apple, but they got disrupted by it. So the short answer to your question is you're going to either be disrupted or you're going to lead the disruption. I urge people to lead the disruption, meaning I urge you to embrace AI in any way you can and learn about it. None of us have the answer. It's like the internet in 1994, 95. If somebody would have asked me, what's the internet going to look like in 30 years, I would have said, I don't know. It's a great way to send messages to people. I was on CompuServe, and I think what was the other one? There was another one that was out then. I was on these systems, and you could just send messages, but you had to be on the same platform. Of course, there was AOL. You had to send the messages. I wouldn't have, look, I would not have said, 30 years from now, I'm going to be on a live call where I'm talking to somebody face to face, and it's going out on the internet, and thousands of people are going to be able to watch. Millions could watch the message that I have. I wouldn't have seen that coming through the internet. So we don't know where it'll end up, but I do know that if you're not out in front of it, you're going to get run over by it. I like that. I got to write that down.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, I love that story, and I just like to respond to a couple points that you made. The whole thing of Kodak, and you said, where they said that nobody's going to look at pictures on a computer. I'd love to share just a story of my own background and something I said that I was proved wrong as well. I came up in broadcast. I worked for TV rep firms in New York City in the very beginning of my career when I graduated college. And by the way, maybe I don't look like I've been working that long, but when I started working, there was no computer.
You do not look like you have been working that long.
There was a mainframe computer.
I, on the other hand, look every bit as having...
Nobody had a PC on their desk. So I remember that you said when the internet started, I remember that distinctly. I was at my second TV rep firm. And at that time, when that happened, people were talking about TV, and they were talking about, obviously computers. We were all starting getting computers on our desk and this and that. And somebody somewhere, not in our firm, probably somebody, at a industry event or something, speaker said, one day the computer and the TV are going to merge, and you're going to be watching TV on a computer. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, people thought they were crazy. Yeah.
No way. Are you kidding? And my my son, his generation, they don't even watch TV.
Yeah.
Everything streamed,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So
I've got a
I think,
child who only streams and doesn't even use the paid stream services, just streams free stuff, YouTube
yeah,
and all the other
same.
free things that you can get.
Same.
Uh,
Same. So we were certainly proven wrong. So never say never. And I think these are good examples of we're in uncharted water. We don't know where this is going to go
you
for
know,
sure. But I love that. Lead the disruption or be disrupted
or
by
be
it.
disrupted. And people
Or
look
be
at a BNI
disrupted.
and they say, well, it's a face-to-face organization. They're not, technology oriented. And they'd be wrong if they said that because,
Mhm.
I mean, think about this for a moment. We own the domain bni.com. You you have to be an early adopter to technology to own a 3-letter domain.
This is true.
And we have had this domain for decades, and we were an early adopter. And so we have been early adopters to a lot of things. And I think those who are going to be out in front are the ones who are early adopters. Even if you're confused, even if you're not quite sure where you're going to end up, you got to start moving in that direction.
Yeah, agreed.
Success is not linear. You know
Mhm.
this. It's not a straight line. It's a very crooked line. And so you're
Mhm.
going to make some wrong turns along the way. Don't worry about it. It's okay. You're going to have some failures along the way. Okay. Don't worry about it. Failure, I've always felt that failure is your tuition for success.
Mhm.
That
For
if
sure.
you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes, that's the key. You got to learn from those mistakes. If you make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes, that's your tuition for success. By the way,
That's
I've
a
paid a lot of tuition over my.
tuition. That's a good, yeah, for sure. Same. I mean, one of the things it's really uh, I heard from a leader and mentor, if you will, at one point, and he said, we'll learn more from the mistakes than we will from the successes, depending on how we handle it. And I always remember that, and I threaded that for sure into my team. It's like, listen, we're gonna make mistakes, but we're going to have lessons learned. That's the project management 101. You look back and you see what didn't work, what did work, why, and you learn from it and move forward. So I would agree. I mean, I think in terms of AI, even though it is uncharted, I think also I just did an episode about this. Some of the events that I've been to and talks that I've listened to on AI and just implementing them in business. And I think this is important for the audience and for leaders to hear is that you can't then say people are not going to be important because actually what's happening is a lot of the companies that are leveraging AI without the readiness, which the readiness is not having the tech, it's making sure that we've incorporated and figured out what business problem do we want to solve with it, and is our team ready to handle it? And have we addressed the elephant in the room? Are they going to embrace it, or are they going to shy away from it because they're afraid that they're going to lose their job? So all of that has to be still considered in leveraging it,
Well,
leading the disruption with it.
I think if you don't embrace it, you are absolutely going to lose your job.
Agree.
You know,
Yeah, like,
if
good
you
point.
embrace it, are you going to keep it? Possibly, but if you don't embrace it, you're going to lose it for sure.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing that people can gain is learning how to leverage it and use it as their partner, and what business problems can you use to help it,
Fix it. Yeah.
succeed and speed up the work and all of that. I love that. So I would love to move into talking about your latest book. Can you tell me a little bit about the networking is a marathon, not a sprint? And kind of obviously you've written so many books, you've talked about this, you started BNI, but just talk about what that kind of emphasizes in terms of how to network
Yeah.
and make it
Well,
a
one of
long
the
game,
things, this
global.
is a very international book. One of my co-authors is in the United Kingdom. One is in India. And so, but we all had the same experience in our networking in the countries we live in and in the countries that we've spoken in. And that is that a lot of people treat networking. Um, they hope that it's a get rich quick scheme. They hope
Hmm.
that they could just meet people and uh, you know sell them products or services. They use networking as that face to face cold calling opportunity, like I told you
Yeah.
earlier, and it doesn't work that way. It takes time. You have to build relationships with people if you want to get referrals. Now, look, you might you might meet someone at a networking event and stumble over the opportunity to do business at that event, and that's great. But even a blind squirrel can find a nut. You can stumble over business, but that's not the way to build a referral based business. The way to build a referral based business is by building relationships. You build relationships, and then people are going to refer business to you. Building relationships takes time, so it's not a sprint; it's a marathon, and you got to go into it understanding that building relationships takes time and effort. But I mean, what kind of effort, really? I mean, it's better than cold calling. You know, I taught people how to cold call many years ago, and I don't want to ever do that again for the rest of my life. It's a
Yeah.
horrible experience. Can it work? Yeah. Do I want to do it? No. So the book is really about the process of understanding that it takes time to build relationships, and that there's a time confidence curve, that when you hit that time confidence curve, that when people have confidence in your ability to provide a quality product or service, they will start to refer you if you're educating them how to.
Hmm. So, if you could talk about how the BNI chapters and the activities within them, obviously, if you're in business, most people are familiar with BNI, but in case people are not, how it works, maybe give a little bit more about that and how that relates to what you just talked about, building relationships and getting referrals.
Yeah, anyone that's interested in BNI, I mentioned we have the domain bni.com. You can go there for information. BNI, we allow only one person per professional classification. So a direct competitor may not be in there. There might be, you might have a commercial real estate agent and a residential real estate agent, or you might have several attorneys with different specialties. But it's one person per professional classification. We get together every week, so there's that timed repetition. We get together every week, and we have a formal meeting, and the formal meeting involves first some open networking, but then some education. You do a weekly presentation. It's short. It depends on the size of the chapter, but it could be a minute, where you talk about one aspect of your business, a little tidbit of your business. And then the next week, it's another tidbit, and the week after, another and another and another. So over the course of a year, you've done a pretty good job of educating your referral partners how to refer you. And at one point or 2 points throughout the year, you'll have a chance to give a 10-minute talk or a 12-minute talk to go into more detail and answer questions. So, and then there are many other things. And by the way, we track at those meetings, we track referrals. So people will stand up and say, I have 3 referrals today, and they'll hand out those referrals. That's how we know that in the last 12 months, we did 17 million referrals and generated 27 billion from what the members report, based on what they enter into our computer system, BNI Connect. So we literally have 11,500 meetings every week all around the world. And it's amazing the size of the organization and how it works so consistently around the world. You can go to a country that you don't know the language, and you know exactly where you're at in the BNI meeting. If you know BNI, you know where you're at in the BNI meeting, because they're very much the same all around the world. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so they operate really the same
Yeah.
all over the world, and the
Same
structure
manual,
is the same, and
same
the same
process.
manual, all that.
Yeah. I
I
remember I
would
was in
love.
Sweden. I was in Sweden. First time I ever heard BNI in a different language was Swedish. And Swedish, it's not like French, where you might pick up a word or two, or I grew up in Southern California, so you pick up a little bit of Spanish. Swedish is it's Swedish, and it's got this sort of sing-song kind of
Yeah.
tone of, so I'm
Yeah.
listening to this entire meeting in Swedish, and one of the members leans over and says, you have no idea what he's talking about, do you? And I said, yeah, he's introducing the referral part of the meeting. He's explaining, if you have a referral, give it, and if you don't, you give a testimonial. And he said, wow, you speak Swedish. I said, no, I wrote the agenda. That's what happens now. And he said, that's exactly what he's saying. I say, I know. The program is very consistent worldwide. It's that consistency that makes business successful. And so
Mhm.
for your listeners or viewers, I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they chase too many bright, shiny objects. You want to be successful in business, do 6 things 1,000 times,
Yep.
not 1,000 things 6 times. And it doesn't have to be 6, it can be 5, it can be 7. But you do a handful of things and you do it over and over and over again, consistently over time. And you're much more likely to be successful.
Yeah. That's amazing. I before we move on, because I definitely have a question relating to that, the bright and shiny things. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders business owners can tend to get distracted with so many new things. But you clearly have stated that the operations are the same, that the BNI groups run the same way. I love that consistency and structure. Are there any differences, just out of curiosity, that you've noted or that you can talk about that have to do with cultural differences because of another country or just different business landscape and how that might be reflected in the BNI group?
I would say that they're minor and that it goes counter to what everyone says about doing business globally. And one of the reasons, I mean, there's several reasons why I say that. First of all, it's not Americans doing business immediately with Brits who are doing business with the Japanese who are doing business with Australians. It's a local community. It's Main Street of whatever country, whatever city. So it's Mexican business members doing business with Mexican business members. And so the cultural similarities are there. We're not asking them to change culturally. And what a lot of people don't think about is that there's another culture completely, and that's the culture of entrepreneurism.
Hmm.
And what we have done in BNI is we have an overlay that's gone on top of the cultural context. And we're not telling anyone to change their culture. So, in Australia, instead of saying good morning, everyone, they might say good day, mates. It'll be those little differences, but there's this culture of entrepreneurism and nobody ever thinks about that. And what we tend to look at as human beings is we look at our differences and not all the similarities we have. And someone, I remember once somebody said, well, BNI will really struggle in Japan because just the business card thing. I mean, Americans will just toss a business card. It's not a big deal. But Japanese have what's called the maishi ritual, where if you've ever been to Japan or Asian countries like China, a little bit in India, they hand a business card and bow, and you accept the business card, look at it, maybe comment. Never, ever, ever, ever write on a business card in Asia, and
Interesting.
particularly in Japan. Don't even ask them if it's okay. It's rude.
Interesting.
So there's those cultural differences. So people like, the BNI thing's not going to work because Americans will toss a business card, but the Japanese have this ritual. And I said to them, yeah, but we're both passing out business cards. I'm not given a rock, and
Mhm.
they're given a business card. We're both given our business cards. And so we have this tendency as humans to count all the differences and not the similarities. And there are so many similarities in successful business people
True.
worldwide. And all we've done is provide an overlay, a business overlay on top of the cultural context, not tried to change the cultural context.
That's super interesting and also really valid point because there's a culture, just like there's cultures of doctors, there's behaviors and operation of doctors. Doesn't matter the specialty, there's that similarity, right? So it's very clear that the culture of an entrepreneurship kind of overlays. And I love the example of the business card because you're right. You could focus on the differences, but you're right. We're both handing out business cards and being just open to, okay, there's a different procedure, but it is the same thing,
It's the
right?
same thing we're handing out, just we're handing it out differently.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, so I want to talk a little bit more, follow up on what you said about consistency and doing six things, 1,000 times over rather than doing 1,000 times. and getting that perfection. Talk to me a little bit more about that and how that's impacted not only your experience. I mean, obviously, some of it is inferred. You've been doing BNI for a long time, right? But just in terms of business and what you've seen and the members, just if you could talk a little bit more about that and how to stay on track and not get distracted by the bright and shiny things, which
Yeah.
in today's day and age is so difficult.
It is difficult. And you mentioned bright, shiny things. And I keep this in my desk to talk about the 6 things 1,000 times, my bright, shiny object. All too often, people are constantly chasing bright. Oh, look at that. Let's try this idea. I'm going to do
Yeah.
this for a little while. Oh, no, wait a minute. Here's another one over here. Let's try this over here. And they keep bouncing back and forth instead of sticking to something and doing it over and over and over again. Now, what are the somethings? Well, you learn those something. I mean, today more than ever, content is out there. Information is out there. And so you find somebody who you respect and admire. You find shows like this where you can find individuals who you respect and admire, and then you take their suggestions and you employ their suggestions and you do it consistently. And by the way, you got to do your vetting of the people that you are going to follow. In some cases, there's one New York Times bestselling person who is giving advice to people on throwing events, and I know the guy. And the big event he always talks about, he lost his shirt on. He lost a boatload of money on, but it was a big event. And so, do your due diligence. Learn a little bit about the individual, the person, and if they, remember I said, the older I get, the less I believe in words, the more I believe in behaviors. If their behaviors match their words, then those are the people to follow, and those are the people to listen to. And you pick a handful of things and you do those things over and over and over and over again from advice from people who have been successful. And you too will be successful. And don't worry about making mistakes. You'll make them. It happens. It happens to all of us. People think, because I run a global or the founder of a global organization that, that I made no mistakes. I probably made more mistakes than I had successes, but I really tried to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah. So yeah, as we talked about, and 100%, it's interesting. One of the things that I've recently been hearing a lot, and this word, and been talking about it myself. You mentioned about vetting people, and that's a big thing now, because there really is a trust deficit, because there are so many bad actors out there, and there are so many people that are proclaiming to know XYZ, to have this secret. As my father used to always say, if it's too good to be true, if it looks too good to be true, sounds too good. It is, right? Yeah. And I think that it's difficult. I've had my fair share of being misled myself as a business owner, for sure. But we definitely are in this climate of, it's really difficult to choose who I should listen to, who I should follow, who really has, the credibility, if you will, especially with the influencers and all of that, right? And that social media that does that. So, it's funny, something so, I don't want to say simple, but something so tried and true, right? That behaviors and actions match words is something that applies to so many things, right? Relationships, just trust in general, all of that really being applied here.
There's a lot of people, you said influencers, a lot of people out there, that are fast talkers and will give you, all these, this great story, and you just gotta double check. Is this accurate? And now we have Monsieur Google. And I'm telling you, I have learned so much about people that I was thinking about maybe doing business with by getting on and going, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to do this. And reviews from people, whether it be Yelp or whatever, where you make a decision, and not everybody's always going to be happy. And I know that going into these,
right.
Vetting somebody.
Right.
Oh, here's one thing: if somebody gets a bad review on a website, do they respond to it?
Hmm.
Do they say, "Hey, I'm really sorry you had a bad experience.
Yes.
Give me a call. Let's make it right." Or, this is what's happened and this is why it happened. Whatever. If it sounds like a legitimate response, then I'm impressed by that.
Hmm.
But in longevity, we've been in business 41 years. It's hard to be in business for 41 years and be a scam,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's why I say it's not an overnight success. It's a marathon. Even my own business is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you're so right. Like, one thing I'll just comment and add to, yeah, we have Google, but the other thing is making sure you've checked and really looked for the other differing opinion, because as we know, with the algorithms and so on, you might be seeing one side, and I
Yeah,
think that
that's why you
that
want to do a review. Put in the name and do review. Or sometimes
exactly,
I'll put in the name and put scam. Uh, and and
exactly, that's
and
right, exactly.
and sometimes I'm shocked at what I see, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to
Yeah, because
proceed.
you have to fight the confirmation bias, where you're just finding that thing that's confirming it. Nope, you got to look for that other
Yeah,
thing.
it
So
helps if you go deeper.
I
And we've all
think
done it. I've done it. I've hired people
absolutely.
without doing
Me too.
the necessary due diligence.
Me too. And learn from that.
Yes, you do.
And
That's the
learn from
tuition.
you. That's right. That's right. It's a high price. It's really a high price, but it's well worth to go through, because you definitely keep that in your mind.
Yeah, you don't do it over and over again. It's if you do it over and over again, it's like that's
No. So, well, we were talking about leadership earlier, but I would just love to know from your perspective, your own, you've led for decades, different cultures. What leadership lesson, and maybe you've already said it, but I'm going to give you the chance to answer it, has stayed constant no matter where you are in the world or with who, meaning generationally and all of that? What do you think is the answer?
well. I think contextual intelligence is really important for leadership. You're going to understand the context of the environment that you're going into. And when you understand that, having an adaptive capacity, the capacity to adapt to the scenario that you're dealing with, this is all part, I think, of being a good leader. I think you mentioned servant leadership. I certainly agree. I think an important aspect of being a good leader for me, and not all. I mean, I know a handful of leaders that don't practice this, and they're good leaders. But for me, I believe humility is important in leadership. I think that humble people don't think less of themselves, they just think of themselves less. And I think that's a powerful leadership concept and I've met people that certainly walk that talk. People like Jack Canfield, who wrote Chicken Soup for the
Yeah,
Soul. Jack's a really good
yeah.
friend, and his ego does not enter the room before he does. He, he's just he's he is who he shows up in the world as, and I love that about Jack. Richard Branson. I've spent a fair amount of time on Necker Island, and I mean weeks. Getting to know Richard. I I can't say he's a friend. Certainly, he knows who I am, and I've spent enough time with him to know he has great humility.
Hmm.
Um, I'm okay. So one time, I don't tell this story
Love
too
it.
often. One time, I was on Necker and he had to leave for the day, and he took off, and his staff were there, and I was like, okay, okay, okay. How is he really? I mean, tell me how he really is to work with. And to a person, Maria, they're like, what you see is what you get. This is why we love working for this man. He's just fantastic. If he's not happy, he'll tell you. If he's happy, he'll tell you, and he'll speak to the help the same way he speaks to the millionaires.
Hmm.
And and so I love people like that. To me, that is great leadership. Um, there's a there's a bar offside of Necker, a floating bar where people can go to and have drinks, and they put up a sign because Richard every now and then goes to this bar, He takes people from Necker over to the bar. And there's a sign that the owner put up in the bar that says, "Be kind, like Branson."
Love that.
Yes, I mean, that's humility. And to me, that's great leadership.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. You know what? I mean, first off, one of the best things that he said that I love and hold dear to, in regard to leadership, but also business and customer services. Take care of your people so well that they'll take care of your customers. I mean,
Yep.
it's
Yeah.
super simple, but that is his philosophy. But
And
I
my
love.
experience is he practices that.
That's right. And so, it's funny because in leadership training that I do, there's one exercise that I've been doing for years, and it's basically on purpose trying to identify the traits of what makes a great leader. But all these leaders sitting in a room, what I ask them to do is go back to envision the best leader they ever had. And a lot of people are like, and it's not one person. Okay, maybe it's a collection of characteristics that those people had that if you rolled them all up into one. And I on purpose put them in the position of observer, right? That they're in the seat of thinking of leader that they thought was great and talk about all those characteristics and why they're important. And I swear to you, I've done this exercise thousands of times with thousands of people in different industries, in different types of businesses. And the characteristics are always the same 30 or 40. Humility is one of them, no ego, positivity, and all of that. Like all of the things that come up, being accountable, being a supporter, being a motivator, inspirational, visionary, all the different things, and explaining why that's important, what happens when it's not. And the reason why we spend so much time on that, I tell them, is because you need to know what this looks and feels like. And then we have this great list of characteristics. And then I say, these are your words. This is what you told me makes a great leader. Now, your job is to look at this list, turn the mirror back on yourself, and ask if you hold these qualities.
But
And
Maria, do they have to I don't think they have to hold them all. They need to hold a
no,
handful of them and
no,
hold
no.
them really well.
No, but that's absolutely. But then that's the thing is that then say, before you just say you have these qualities, now think of an action or a behavior that shows that you
Yeah.
actually do have it.
Yeah.
And that's a big eye opener for a lot of people because I think a lot of people might think that they're being positive, but maybe they're not being perceived at that. They might think that they honor honesty or transparency, and are they actually doing that in their behavior? So, I love talking about that because I also think that because I've done it so many times and it's always the same thing. And the reaction is exactly the same. I think it's a good way to understand it, and really hold true to this. It's not what people say. It's not values that people have on the wall? Are they
Right.
actually living them?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So, I'd love to. I'm going to close our interview with one special question, but before we do, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about. You've been honored for philanthropic work, including work with the Red Cross, of course, the BNI Charitable Foundation. I'd love you to elaborate on that. But tell me a little bit about that, and how has that service shaped your own leadership and business philosophy?
Well, I can't speak for others, but I think that I personally have an obligation to put back into the communities from which I draw. And the communities I've done business and have taken good care of me. I'd like to think I've taken good care of them, and it's been reciprocal. And so I have, since I was a young man, participated in nonprofit organizations. When I had no money, I was a big brother. And so it was, it's time, talent, and treasure.
Yeah.
That's how you can contribute to the world. And so it was time that I contributed as a young man. As I gained more experience, I started to share talent and be on boards. And as I achieved some level of success, financial success, I decided to share some of my treasure
Mhm.
to start the BNI Foundation, the Misner Family Foundation, and both foundations actually focus on children and education. Those are the areas that my wife and I really think are important. Children represent 20% of our population, but they're 100% of our future.
Mhm.
And so there are many good things to put your energy on. I would urge business people to find something that lights them up and focus on that. And for us, it's focus on children and education.
I love that. That's beautiful. And that's also something that I also share, that philosophy of giving back, and you, the way you said it was beautiful. You feel an obligation to put back into the communities you pull from. And that's one that I aspire to do, as in the same way, share some of my successes and my treasures as well. But I also think that I share an opinion that it is totally reasonable and possible to be successful at business and give back, right? That profit and philanthropy go together. And there are some people in the business community that it's all for the profits and it's all for the money. And so I love that you're highlighting that. But what are your opinions on that? And you said focus on children; they are our future. But how could we encourage more business people to know that those two things are not mutually exclusive? Being successful in business and also giving back.
Well, there's a well done book called Conscious Capitalism
Hmm.
that talks about making money and being consciously aware of your environment. And I'm not talking about the environment. I'm talking about your community. And I would recommend people take a look at that book. And it's got great advice, and it also has really good data that shows that people who are conscious capitalists who serve communities actually make more money.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yep.
so
I love that.
and I think that's fantastic. I didn't start serving communities because I read that book. I read that book and I was like, well, this absolutely aligns with my philosophy of giving back to communities, and I certainly have grown over this time. So I think I'm a case in point for his philosophy.
I love that. I love that. I love the book. We've actually talked about that book on this podcast. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And we'll also link that in the show notes. That's a great book to read, and really highlights what we're talking about. So, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. But before we go, I do want to delve into a little bit of your personal curiosity and some of your hobbies, and how if we'll share in part of your bio, it says that you are an amateur
Magician, yeah.
and a black belt in karate. Two very different disciplines, by the way.
Very different. And I did the magic because my kids were growing up, and I was actually became a member of the Academy of Magical Arts, known as the Magic
Really?
Castle in Los Angeles. But my kids are all grown now. Maybe as my grandkids, I'll get back into the magic as my grandkids get a little older, and I'll do some magic for them. I did martial arts for many years. I had some health issues and stepped down from the martial arts, but both were great experiences. And I think it's important to have hobbies that you really enjoy. I've got a boat out here near my house, and I go out on the boat regularly. I've got a telescope, and I love doing viewing the planets. I find most interesting to look at. The ice caps of Mars. On a good telescope on a good clear day, you can see the ice caps of Mars, and of course the rings of Saturn and the red spot on Jupiter. And it's not as dramatic as you see in a book, but you've seen it with your own two eyes, which is really quite amazing. And art, fine art. I love fine art. And what's interesting, and wines. I love wine. I have a really nice wine cellar. What's interesting about most of those interests, other than the boating, it was picked up from a class that I had in college, one class or another that I had in college that, and they were all liberal arts kinds of courses, a course on wines and a course on art and a course on, well, astronomy is science, but
Hmm.
they became lifelong interests of mine and are to this day.
And how important, just, is that to balancing out your life? And if you could talk to others, because I think in this day and age, some people don't participate in hobbies and they,
Yeah.
get lost in that. And what does that do for you?
Well, I
And how
can I I can tell your audience what I think the secret to balance is.
Mm.
You ready?
Yeah, ready.
Forget about balance. You'll never have it. Now, people hear that and they go, "Oh, God, I thought I was going to get something good." Well, I hope to give you something good. But here's the deal with balance. When you think of balance, it's like scales, and your health has to be completely in balance with your spirituality, which has to be in balance with your business, which has to be in balance with your personal life, your family. All of that's like it's like scales. And the truth is, particularly for entrepreneurs, business people, it's more of a juggling act than it is a balancing act. And so, and we talk at length about this towards the end of Who's in Your Room. I don't believe it's about balance. I believe it's about harmony. And there's a big difference. Even the graphic for harmony, the yin and the yang, are out of balance if you separate them. And so I lived, Maria, a life that was very much out of balance, but a life that was very much in harmony.
Mm.
And I'll give you just two quick techniques that we talk about in the book. One is be here now. Wherever you are, be there. So don't be at home thinking about the project that's got to get done at work, and don't be at work thinking about the fact that you didn't spend time with the family last night. Wherever you are, be fully present to that moment. And create margins in your life is another one that we talk about. You have to have margins, like margins in a book where you have space, just space to write your thoughts or think your thoughts. Or for me, it's always been a mental health day once a week. I call it my mental health day, where I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm not going to do much other than hang out in the pool or binge watch something on television, which yes, I do.
Hmm.
And it's just going to recharge my batteries. And so I believe in harmony. I think it's possible to have harmony. I think it's almost impossible to have balance.
Yeah. Man, that's great advice and a great way to put it. And I totally appreciate that and would agree. That is one thing that I think, in our culture, I think is important to kind of hear these stories of how you have a life in harmony, which
Yeah,
is so much more fulfilling. And I also think bringing that to the table of recharge, right?
yeah,
Is a battery needs to be recharged. So do we. And the work is so much better, you know?
yeah, absolutely. You're going to do a much better job if you're recharged. So I have 2.6 million miles on American Airlines alone. So I have traveled so much, and particularly as my kids were growing up and I was building the business, I was traveling every other week. And when my son was 17, we were sitting in in the in a big room with a big television, and we're playing Halo, and he's kicking my butt in Halo. And I said to him, I said, "Hey, buddy, he's 32 now?" I said, "Was I around enough for you as you were growing up?" And he said, "We were leveling up to the next level, so in a couple minutes." He said, "What?" I said, "Was I around enough?" He said, "You're around all the time." I said, "Well, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually gone every other week for at least 3 days." He said, "Yeah, I know, but it's like when you're here, you're here. So can we get back to the game now?" And I'm like, yes, we can. We can get back
Mhm.
to the game now. And that's what I mean by be here now.
Be here
So you
now.
can travel every other week and you don't have to be a bad dad.
Yeah,
Because when you are present, make sure to be present
present.
in the way that that particular child wants to have you present. And all three of my kids wanted me present in different ways.
And that really goes for everything, right? Like, is not doing an email when somebody's talking to you and your
Yeah.
and your team and just all of that. Be here now. Whatever you said, just really be present. I agree. I love that you shared that. Thank you so much for all the wisdom that you've dropped today. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. And for the audience listening and watching, we're going to tag everything in the show notes, all the books, information about Ivan and how to get more information on him as well, and BNI as well. And I would just love to continue to thank you, and hopefully everyone has gotten a lot out of this interview. Thank you so much, Ivan, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Maria. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. That's all for now. We'll be back with the next episode of Finding the Upside. Thanks, everyone.